Welcome to One Man's Tracks, the second-hand music channel. This week, I discovered an electronic duo who, over their 35 years as bandmates, have greatly helped to evolve and progress the world of industrial ambient music. From their early beginnings with the band Skinny Puppy, Rhys Fulber and Bill Leeb have collaborated on dozens of albums, selling millions of records through various monikers from Synesthesia, Intermix, Noise Unit, and the legendary underground group Frontline Assembly, all the way to the group I'm here to be talking about today, Delerium. Delerium originally started in 1987 as Bill Leeb's side project with Michael Balch after he'd left Skinny Puppy and formed Frontline Assembly the year previous. Rhys was working on a group of his own at the time called Will, but he did help with production on the debut Delerium album Faces, Forms, and Illusions, but wouldn't become an official member until Balch's departure from Frontline and Delerium shortly after that album. Morpheus and Ciro Fennekin would see the beginnings of the evolution of this Berlin school-inspired, dark, industrial, dubbed-up ambiance in 89 and 90. 91 would see a continuation of this creative electronic spree with two more full-length releases through Dossier Records with some more of that deep cinematic EBM on Stone Towers and Spiritual Archives. They would also release an EP through Third Mind the very same year called Euphoric. Just a fantastic spree of sweeping soundscapes that are some of my favorites of theirs, and it would all sort of culminate in 1994 with a pair of futuristic, spacey epics called Spheres and Spheres 2. Between those spheres, the band released an album that showed a massive shift in mood and tone and almost genre completely, away from that darker variation of a Tangerine Dream-like exploration, picking up a female vocalist, Kristy Thirsk, and shifting towards this more deep forest and enigma-style, trancey world beat with this. Their seventh full-length album and their first through Network Records, released in August of 1994, here's Delerium, Semantic Spaces. Normally for Bill and Rhys, a stylistic shift like this would warrant a completely new offshoot with a totally new name, but in this case, I believe there's an argument to be made that it's just an evolutionary leap and a natural part of Delerium's progression. It may not have been very popular with their fans of the early work, but there's no denying that this more commercially structured production has played a pivotal role in the longevity of this band and Bill and Rhys's numerous other ventures. I still think it's a wonderful record that, sure, is derivative of its contemporaries and, yeah, maybe a tad overindulgent here and there, but it still manages to hold on to that specific signature Delerium stamp that is a special atmosphere that I'm learning to love more and more. An engrossing blend of samples, synths, and production techniques that shine in the darkest of clubs as well as in the intimate embrace of a good pair of headphones. It's not an album I was immediately convinced by, but it has grown on me and continues growing on me the deeper I get into these two's tunes. I feel like this is probably the perfect point for me to have been introduced to Delerium at their commercial turning point, with elements of their past rapidly flowing towards the future. If you find any ideas on this album at all compelling, I'm almost certain that Delerium's got a full-length album that's going to be right up your alley. What was your introduction to Delerium? Do you have a favorite album of theirs? Let me know. Leave me a comment down below. Tease me about some stories of all the things I've been missing out on while I take some time to break down the monumental 77 minutes of Semantic Spaces, one track at a time. And there's no better way to start than the excellent opening track, Flowers Become Screens. With its meditative mood and Kristy Thirsk's cascading vocal lines, you're introduced to Delerium's immersive, complex layering and weighted, blown-out bass lines. At just under 8 minutes long, it's fairly average length for the rest of the songs on this project, with this one being the freest of the lot, thanks in large part to those guiding vocals. This album does well to maintain continuity throughout, slipping seamlessly into the next song, Metaphor. This one's presented like a dream sequence with glistening chimes and enigma-esque Gregorian and ethnic chants. It has these great trancey synth lines in it, but I feel like it's one of the few songs here that gets a little lost in its transition. You get to around the 4-minute mark, grooving, you're along for the ride, you're in it, and then I feel like maybe there's a bit of hesitancy, some changes aren't happening quite quick enough to keep me engaged and carry me through for the next few minutes of this track. Perhaps I'm being too impatient, or maybe I've just been listening to this album a few too many times lately, but I have a similar feeling about the stagnation on the next track, Resurrection. It's overall a super exciting and adventurous track with great spacey builds and drones, but it's got this chant that it's all built around that I feel ultimately is this track's Achilles heel. This sample is just unfortunately too nondescript and empty feeling to build off of, and so the added inputs and samples on top of it just get a little overstimulating or maybe feel like they're overcompensating. I understand that for their breakthrough follow-up, Karma, they recorded all the sounds they used live, and that might have been just what this track needed to really push it over the line. While I may be a little critical of those last couple of songs, I still think they're brimming with potential, and in the context of the album, it's not all that intrusive. I'm just scrutinizing a little bit here. When you get to the shortest and poppiest cut on the album, Incantation, that shows up next, you'll see that that potential is totally not unfounded, because this track has got the goods. It's this irresistible siren song guided by Thirsk's vocals once again. This one's the catchiest of all the tracks here. It's really only one of two that have any real lyrics, but still, it grabs me in. It's super fun to dance and sing along with, really dramatic. It starts with this far less urgent floating feeling, and it then shifts into this deep banger, this club techno hit that is just irresistible. The vast, darker, 10-minute consensual world sits ominously in the center of this album. I get an image of a fleet of giant warships moving purposefully across some large distance towards an oncoming battle or something. It's far, far away still. You get some wonderful textures from this oppressive and groovy bass line that does so well to move this impressive epic. Then we get this CD's most relaxing passage. It's short-lived, and the spa-like introduction to Metamorphosis is cut short like the calm beginnings of Incantations was. You get this intense synth rhythm and more deep, spacey ambiance. It's, however, more grounded than its predecessors this time, with Kristy's vocals being a highlight again here. Flatlands grabs my attention with an abrupt kickoff of chanting monks and fake organ lines that do well to lift this one up, but it once again turns into a case of lack of direction, with even the angelic voice of Delerium unable to guide this misdirected alternative dance piece. In a similar fashion to that of Metamorphosis, it is super competently mixed and produced. It just seems to get a little carried away and overstays its welcome by a few minutes. If getting lost in a grandiose track is something that you're into, you'll likely enjoy those songs more than I did, but I'll bet we can both agree on the effectivity of this album's longest song, Sensorium. At just over 12 minutes long, this one breaks through, opening up with this reverberating ambiance and reflective tonal qualities that just takes the time to explore the space that it creates before this heavy drum and bass loop comes in and effectively picks it up and moves it along for the remainder of the track. That top track ships you seamlessly towards the synthy, rainy start of the final song on the album, Gateway. washing away any lingering urgency. This one gets you good with its funky filtered Afro beat and sends you off with some more of the boys' signature complex electronica fanfare. That's the stuff that fueled me up and launched me through the rest of Delerium's extensive and ever-growing catalog. I may have my hang-ups about particular pieces of some songs in this album. My overall impression of it is a really positive one, and it has super grown on me, this thing. I'd initially almost written them off as sort of an underdeveloped Enigma wannabe. They obviously aren't certain with this sound, and I hadn't taken the time to understand their electro-ambient evolution and appreciate the subtleties of their specific stylings, and just knowing where they came from and where they went to after this made it really clear that this particular piece is highly valuable to them as well as it is to me. So interesting to hear the stylistic growing pains of a band leaping into a whole new lane. The blending of the old with the new is something that Rhys and Bill are obviously quite comfortable with and have done quite a lot as their careers have progressed since the 80s. These two are always taking in new ideas, trying out new processes as the electronic genre progresses, and experimenting with the sounds they enjoy without having any expectations behind them. Since Spheres 2, these guys have put out 6 more full-length LPs under the name Delerium, with Rhys not being a part of just one of those releases. That's their 2000 poem that I believe Colin Richardson took part in his place. They've most recently came out with the album Mythology in 2016. That was their first release through Metamorphosis Records, and there are rumors that there might be another album that's already in the works. It's alright with me, though, if they continue to take their time with that album, because these two have exposed me to a number of bands that I'm excited to dig into and keep my eyes out for while I'm out looking in the secondhand shops. What are your favorite projects that Rhys or Bill has worked on? Your favorite Delerium album? Leave me a comment, let me know, I'd love to hear it. Leave a like if you're this far in the video, I'd appreciate it, it means a lot. Let's check out another one of these albums that I think you'd enjoy based on this. I've even done an early electronic hits playlist that's linked down there with all the other music I've talked about today. Subscribe. See you next week for a throwback secondhand retrospective. Woo! Thanks so much for watching, everybody. Don't get too